We're excited to have with us here on the Oakland County Megacast Deanna Abouali. She is the director of the Arab American National Museum. Thank you for being with us on the Oakland County Megacast. I am ashamed to admit that I have never been to your museum, and I knew it existed, but I've never actually been there. But when I was on the website today, I'm like, what a beautiful museum for us to have in our backyard, because it is the first and only museum, am I correct, still to this day telling the Arab American story?
That's right. First, I want to thank you for inviting me and for giving me this opportunity, and nice to meet you as well. Yes, the Arab American National Museum in Dearborn remains the only museum of its kind. It was the first. And yeah, we tell the Arab American story. We try to promote and preserve and document the history, culture, and contributions of Arab Americans. As you know, Southeast Michigan is a major center for Arab Americans, but there are Arab Americans throughout the United States and congregated in places like California, New Jersey, but really all over the country. So we try to represent their stories, the different stories and voices of this community.
Let's start with first, how did Southeast Michigan become such a hub for Arab Americans?
I believe it's because of the motor company. A lot of them came and to work in the Ford factories and the other motor automobile factories, and so it was a destination for all kinds of immigrants. South End and Dearborn for many years was a very, very actually diverse place where you found not only Arabs but immigrants from other countries in Europe and elsewhere. So that's essentially what brought them to this part of the country.
I since you just said that, it kind of rang a bell in my head. I was speaking with someone recently, and he was saying his dad came here to go work for the motor companies, but he didn't speak English well enough. So he ended up going to work for a grocery store in the city of Detroit, which then led to him owning a grocery store, and then the kids took over. Because how much of a language barrier does this pose for so many people who do immigrate here from the beginning days?
I mean, I think it was a barrier. I mean, you have to, if you this is the thing about these sort of communities that kind of grow and sort of coalesce, right? That of course, if you're coming to the United States and English is not your first language or a language it can pose a sort of difficulty and barrier. But I think if that's why maybe some immigrant groups tend to congregate among each other so that there is at least a sort of community for them to speak their language. But I know for many, Arab Americans, they tried to, whether in the factories they were able to learn English. And this is just really the problem of the first generation of immigrants who come here. Once they have children, English becomes, for the most part, their first language. So it's really just a temporary, I think, barrier that, immigrants face. Once they sort of are settled in the United States, once their, children are born, they kind of, find work, are able to, associate with other Americans, and it becomes less and less of a problem. But that's the sort of the kind of that's why I always find immigrants very, very brave people. I mean, imagine yourself going to a country where you don't speak the language and having to sort of survive and acclimate and make a living. So it's really something that they've overcome. It's a barrier, but I think yeah, most immigrants are able to sort of overcome that.
Their stories are absolutely inspiration, and they do kind of play out into the American dream that if you come here and you work hard, you can make a living and support a family. One of the things I find really kind of depressing is that when, like you said, it's like they may speak their language when they come, but then their children or their children's children don't want to maybe learn their native language. And so you'll have second and third generations that can't maybe speak fluently with their great grandparents. And to me, it's like one of the greatest gifts that you can give your child here in America more than anywhere else. Because if you do go to Europe, most people speak 2 or 3 languages fluently. That's not the case here in the US. But if you can teach your kids a fluent language from a young age, it is such a gift. But because so many generations, they want to be Americanized per se, they're not teaching them their native tongue. And I feel like that's like a disservice to their kids, because companies now, are you finding that businesses and companies are looking for people of diverse backgrounds with foreign language speaking skills?
No, absolutely. I think, knowing learning any foreign language or second language is a benefit. When you know another language and you're interested in, say, that country or that culture, not knowing that language is it's like being colorblind, right? You can't really understand that culture. So a lot of people who say are interested in the Middle East and the Arab world and don't speak Arabic, I'm talking about journalists and other people, a lot of them don't speak Arabic, and how can you understand that part of the world? For the children of immigrants, I think it depends on really when you were born. So I personally, my parents immigrated to Canada, and we lived there until I was 7. Then we went back to the Middle East. But when I was in Canada in the 70s, you didn't really teach your kids Arabic. It wasn't sort of something to be done, and we didn't live within an Arab community in Toronto. I have to say, here in Dearborn, because it's such a large community, a lot of generations, the younger generations do speak Arabic still. It's still a language that is spoken, even if the person was born in the United States. So some of my colleagues were born here, yet they are able to speak Arabic. So it's really a function of whether you live in a community and you can keep it up. When you were born, let's say, if you live in a part of the country where there is no community to maintain that language. But I do agree with you, having a second language or third is just an asset that is very, very valuable. And I wish I wish more Americans spoke, multiple languages. I mean, how can there's no, you don't lose anything when you learn a language, and instead you gain so much more. And it's just a window to different worlds, really.
I will say I tried to learn Arabic through Rosetta Stone. No, it just didn't go well because I wanted to be able to communicate. I was a former reporter who was often sent to Dearborn, and you wanted to be able to communicate with the people of the public, but Rosetta Stone was just not the answer. But there are new things out there as well as Meetup is a good place. And speaking of that, in that people who do want to learn more about Arab Americans and your culture and your community, let's talk about the museum. What can they find at the museum? Because I know is it still closed right now?
Unfortunately, yeah, it's still closed. We're not sure when we're going to reopen in 2021 for sure, but we're keeping it closed for protect everybody's safety, basically.
So many other museums and other cultural institutions have turned to virtual. Are you doing the same thing?
We are. A lot of actually all of our programming is now online. So in terms of programming, I mean, like, musical performances or poetry readings or panel discussions. Those are all online. Yeah, we sort of switched online back in April. And that's been pretty successful. We've had a rich, programs since then. We are having an in-person event at the end of October. And it's going to be outside, actually, in our parking lot. And it's a dance performance. So if you go to the website and you go to our calendar, it's called Badi Watani, and it's a drive-in dance performance. So there's limited tickets, but it's safe. Everybody stays in their cars, and we have our artists in residence, and a few other dancers performing for us. So, but generally, yes, we are closed, but you can find some information about Arab Americans. You can access our archive. There are different collections. We have a new exhibit up on something called the Pen League, which is a group of writers that included the famous Khalil Gibran, author of The Prophet. We have an exhibit sort of honoring that group and their literary productions, and it's because this year is the 100th anniversary of that literary group that they lived in Lower Manhattan in New York in the early 20th century.
Diana Abouali, the director of the Arab American National Museum, joining us on the Oakland County MegaCast. Diana, you mentioned that all of your current programming is online, with the exception being the event that you're holding outside in your parking lot at the end of October. For those that are interested in the programming of the Arab American National Museum, or those that have visited before but want to revisit the museum in a virtual space, what can they expect to learn about right now with the current programming, and or does that programming encompass kind of all of what they would normally experience at the Arab American National Museum?
I mean, yes and no. I mean, there's, some of this programming that we used to do in person, we've kind of repurposed it or reformatted it for the online platform. So for instance, we have a very popular offering called Yalla Eat Tours, where it's a walking tour through Dearborn, and you visit different eating establishments, whether restaurants or, roastery, what do they call them? Roasteries, where you get nuts and those kind of things. So we're not, obviously we can't do that now, but what we offered instead or are offering instead is a sort of Yalla Eat chef series. So every Tuesday afternoon, on Instagram, one Arab American chef, located throughout the country, doesn't have to, not necessarily in Metro Detroit, teaches us how to make a signature dish of theirs or a favorite dish. So some things get sort of repurposed, others are new. We've done, I'm trying to think of something new that we've done, sort of these poetry readings, virtual poetry readings by Arab American poets or Arab poets. Sometimes they're bilingual. So it's really a mix of different kind of offerings. The thing you can't see so much yet, even though we are sort of working on getting it available and accessible to educators and students, is sort of going through our exhibits, our core galleries, which tells the story of the Arab American immigrant experience of coming to America, settling and becoming acculturated in this country, and sort of learning about important Arab Americans who really made an impact on the country. That we're working on sort of enhancing and providing for our visitors who can't come.
Well, Arab Americans have definitely been such a vital part of the Metro Detroit landscape, and your contributions to, our community on so many different levels. And with that, by offering this museum, I know you've been open since 2005. It's so important to have this in our backyard, but so many other museums are also struggling right now because you rely on donations and ticket sales as well as contributions from the corporate world. How are you all doing right now in that area?
We're doing fine.
It's been hard, right?
It's been hard, yeah. So if you were to ask me this question back in April, I wouldn't know what to tell you. We were projecting, we had to lay off more than half our staff, for instance, in later April, which was for me personally the hardest thing I ever had to do professionally. It was a horrible, horrible time. We were projecting, 45% of our revenues to be gone because we had to close and we weren't making any money. But we really, we put our nose to the grind. We launched a fundraising appeal that was successful. We implemented this really aggressive grant writing campaign. We got a lot of grants, and we were most recently selected by the Ford Foundation as one of America's cultural treasures. So these are 20 organizations, cultural organizations throughout the United States. Black, Indigenous, Asian, immigrant. So these 20 of these sort of institutions were chosen. We were one of the 20. So we've gotten this wonderful recognition from the Ford Foundation. It's a 4-year grant of $2 million, and we are really over the moon. This is it's general operating support, which is unheard of. And this is sort of, I'm really happy that Ford Foundation is sort of at the pioneer and pushing this new trend in philanthropy. and foundational giving to really support organizations like ours, um, and supporting them with basically operating support, which is like I said, not common. So this is going to give us an infusion of money and funds to really carry us forward for the next 4 years as we approach our third decade. So we're doing okay. We're a lot better than we were. And this is really all due to the hard work of the staff and, Access, which the museum is a part of. Access is the Arab Community Center for Economic and Social Services, largest Arab American nonprofit, also located in Dearborn. They're the parent organization, and they've also been supporting us as well. So this is really, if we're doing well, it's really because of, again, staff, Access, and our community that has supported us, whether it's the Arab American community or the larger community in Metro Detroit and and different foundations as well. So I want to thank everybody for allowing us to continue and to be, this beacon, this cultural beacon for Southeast Michigan and for Arab Americans all over.
You're such a champion of diversity within our community, and while we understand the importance of the Arab American community and Metro Detroit and the greater area, I think some communities and maybe some states don't understand it. I will say I did not know what the Chaldean population was and what it was about until I moved to the Detroit area. So it's been an education, and we appreciate your voice and documenting these important stories. And so before we let you go, Deanna, anything you want the public or your listeners to know? Even more so now, we're in this contentious election coming up where diversity has it's been so divisive for our entire nation as well as even our community. What do you want people to know about the Arab American community? And if they feel uncomfortable asking questions, should they go ahead and have that conversation? Because I think people are afraid to have conversations right now because of the atmosphere into which our nation is portraying right now.
I think if, look, I firmly believe that obviously diversity and having multiple perspectives only makes this country stronger. So giving everybody the rights that they deserve, enabling these different communities, promoting diversity and equity is essential for a successful society. If people have questions about Arab American, of course, you should ask. And I think asking, but also listening is very important. Asking good questions, but listening to the answers, listening to what, people might need from you, the person asking the question. I think this also works across the board, whether you're asking questions, to the African American community or the Indigenous community. Asking and being genuinely curious and wanting to know and wanting to extend solidarity is important, but listening is also just as important as well. So I think a little asking, a little talking, but a lot of listening is really important.
We all are better when we open our hearts and we listen to people from different backgrounds, and we learn so much more. So quickly, if people do want to get involved, or maybe I know you're doing a lot of things virtually right now, they just want to learn more, how can they do that?
So we have a website, www.arabamericanmuseum.org. If you go there, there's all the information that you need. We have also a calendar of events that you can click on and learn about what's going on, whether it's, we're having a live performance that's going to be broadcast on Facebook Live, or whether it's the Chef Series on Instagram. All of that information is located there. And any updates we have about when we're going to reopen, you can find there as well. Also, if there's any questions, you can email me, you can email the different, if you're interested in education, if you're interested in public programming, all our emails, the emails of respective, staff people are located as well. So it's really the best place to go to. But you can find us also on Facebook, on Instagram, and on Twitter.
Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us here on the Oakland County MegaCast. We always appreciate it. And I look forward to being able to visit your museum in person. I saw it virtually, and it was beautiful. And thank you again for being a champion for diversity we're all better with the more voices that we have in our community.
Yes. Please come visit, and I will give you a tour. Personally.
We would love that. We would appreciate that. The Arab American National Museum right here in Dearborn, it's the first and only museum dedicated to telling the Arab American story. We are so incredibly blessed to have them right here in our backyard. So we want to say thank you to them.